Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How you doing this afternoon, Jared?
I'm good, man. I love summertime. 90 degrees, sunshine, and hot. So I am happy.
Yeah, man. I got a nice tan going from
You
being
are
at the
pretty
lake.
tan. I love it. Where'd you go again?
Lake of the Ozarks. So all those people that, I've never watched it, but I heard from a lot of people that watch Ozark on Netflix to apparently watch out for the money launderers down there.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they laundering money from?
I guess it's like Mexico.
Moonshine or something?
Some drugs from Mexico or something like that.
I just
don't know
loved
too
how you
much.
called it Trump country.
Oh, man, I've never seen so many Trump flags in my life, man. And I've lived in multiple cities in Texas, but, yeah, that lake, or I guess Missouri in general, just Trump, Trump, Trump. Everywhere. I even saw a boat with a massive just Trump letters on the side of it. Yeah.
How are you treated?
Great.
Yeah. No issues?
Great. No, everyone was awesome and had a great time. Yeah. I mean, my experience is nothing like what I see in the media.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm glad you went off and got your suntan on because that was the first thing I noticed when you got back.
Yeah.
So that's good. How are you feeling about last week's episode? What was it? The end of America and all the turmoil that we found ourselves in.
Yeah, I'm feeling good, man. I think it's a good end. I think it's a good end to the America that we've been. And I think that we're moving to a more positive, loving, accepting world. America. How are you feeling about it?
Man, I'm torn. I'm not gonna lie, I'm torn. I hope that's where we're headed. And I understand there's gotta be pain for there to be growth, and I'm hopeful that by finally addressing some of the underlying racial stuff that's been there for as long as we've been alive and longer, that maybe we'll get to a place where we're more enlightened and accepting, and we truly form an America that's literally one country, not a bunch of, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, European, all the different subsects, but we finally become Americans.
Yeah, which we already are. We're all Americans.
I hope so. I hope we just quit focusing on all our differences. And it's interesting, like even on I saw Morgan Freeman had a pretty cool quote, and it said, if you want to end racism, quit talking about race. I'm not always a black man. You're not always a white journalist. Like, why do we always feel like we have to put the race in front of somebody? He's like, I'm a man. So that's something I think we can all start practicing now, is quit describing your neighbors by their skin color and just talk about them as what kind of people they are.
Yeah, amen. I love that.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm glad you brought us this episode today, and I truly do believe deep down inside that we're setting the world up to be better.
Yeah.
For our children. Honestly, I hope selfishly I'm around to see it.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't take so long that it's just something that I dream about, but that we don't see come to fruition in that time.
Right. Well, I think you're already seeing it, man. You are. It's here. I think your experience must be pretty difficult as a former cop, a leader in our community. I mean, I've seen people reach out to you on social media looking for what you have to say, and it weighs heavily on all cops in America right now, and what we're seeing in the media. But like I tell my close friends and family, the media magnifies the bad. So much of the stuff that I see in the media has never been my experience.
Right.
Is hardly ever. I mean, of course, yeah, in my 29 years of life, I've had some racism or have witnessed racism, growing up in West Texas, but it's not most people that I meet and see are loving people, are people that don't let themselves be separated by race. But I think what is happening now with social media, I love how you always tell people, like, we're our own broadcasting stations, right? That we're starting to see that the media magnifies the bad and the evil, and and they get to decide what we want to be mad about, right? At the beginning
Yeah.
of the year, my business was in trouble. Oh, the national vape crisis. All these teens are dying. But this is what we're putting on the news, and this is what everyone needs to be pissed off and care about. Okay, now it's Corona. Okay, now it's racism. It's a fucking schedule, bro, of
Yeah.
like, now this is what you're going to be mad about. There's tons
Yeah.
of things that we can be mad about, you know?
Yeah, but I do agree with you that by us all having a voice now and an ability to reach so many people with different thoughts, I truly believe what we're seeing is a power shift, and people that have been in power and controlled media and kind of controlled what narratives we are led to believe about each other are being exposed. And people are starting to go like, wait a second, I see this on the news, but I've never had that in my neighborhood. And then neighborhoods get together like, yeah, we don't have it in our neighborhood either. And we're literally starting to expose a lot of the things that have just been underlying and not relevant anymore, not our way of life. However, we didn't question, why are we still being told this? Why are we still being led? And I'm not from the South. I grew up in Maryland, which is south of the Mason-Dixon line, but it was kind of more north during the Civil War. But I couldn't imagine being African American, like going to the courthouse to get my license plates or my driver's license and having statues of Jefferson Davis staring me down.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing he was the president of the Confederate, like he literally fought to keep slaves. And so part of me is like, how did we get to 2020 and never think we should probably reflect back on, is this inclusive as we move forward? Because history is history. But if it's changing how people act each day and how they feel doing it, then we probably should go, okay, we're better than this. So it's, when I see that, I'm kind of astonished that in 2020, some places still legitimately glorify slave owners.
Right.
And most of those places are predominantly African American still.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's very good changes coming. As far as the police stuff goes, man, one of the reasons I retired when I did is I always believed we could be better. And it was hard. I couldn't necessarily say that or reach as many people if I had a full-time job and I had to go within their policies. But by getting outside, I can say what I want, and I can challenge the status quo. And I plan to do that. So,
Yeah.
and I've been doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just now, like, people are like, oh, wait a second. Maybe there's some different ways we can do stuff. Guys getting shot, repeatedly. And I don't care, people being shot by cops that don't deserve to be shot. I don't care what race they are. You got to fix that.
Right.
And, there's a lot of ways we can do that. But while it weighs heavy at times, I also think, man, it's like the perfect spot where I'm supposed to be. And talking about being enlightened.
Yeah.
To me, part of being enlightened is not necessarily trying to dictate your path, but just doing what you're supposed to do and wait for the path to arrive. So maybe this is my path.
Yeah, and this difficulty and hardship and being uncomfortable and even angry right now is very similar to what we talk about a lot as your growth as an individual.
Yeah.
That adversity is what helps you grow. And right now we're going through a lot of adversity as a collective.
Yeah.
The coronavirus, all the Black Lives Matter movements and the police movements and all these things, to where it is a stressful time, but pressure makes diamonds. We need that extra stress, and I truly believe that we are moving towards a more loving place. And that's why I wanted to talk about reaching enlightenment, because I think that what's important for us to do as individuals and as a collective is to really try and be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, right? As we progress in life, when you get to a certain point in life, then it's all about giving back to others, right? When you reach a certain level in your life to where all of your needs are met, and there's many theories, Maslow's hierarchy, everything, when you meet all of your needs, then it's like, how can you give back? And even in the business world, also all the successful people, Tony Robbins doesn't count his dollars anymore. He counts how many people he fed. I think last year that's his main metric. Like, I fed 500 million people last year. And I think that when we go back to the basics of love, right? Like, love is a true champion of all. Like, love wins. That's my favorite hashtag. That's my love wins. Love is undefeated. Like, nothing is stronger than love, and that's all That's all that we need right now. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about reaching enlightenment. And before we get into that, I had to Google the definition just to be like, okay,
Yeah.
let's see what Google says first of all of what exactly does enlightened mean. And I was actually pretty surprised because when we think of the word enlightenment, at least for me, I think more of like spiritual, religious context. But Google actually says having or showing a rational, modern, and well-informed outlook. So with that, what is that what is this adjective? What is this definition of enlightened mean to you, Jared? How do you take that?
Man, for me, I think to be truly enlightened and a person that lives in that enlightenment world and space, I think it comes down to literally you approach everything as an opportunity to learn and gather information, not prove what you already know to be right. I think that's where I personally struggle, and I struggle much of my life is kind of being an alpha type male and knowing what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. I wasn't always open to learn from people around me. I was more intent on showing you why you should learn from me and being right. And I think to truly be enlightened means you realize you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the information, and no matter what somebody's plot in life may be, you can learn from them. And you should approach every encounter as an opportunity to learn from another human being with different experiences, different values, different backgrounds. So it challenges the arrogance that my status in life allows me to only listen to this group or that group, and really approach every encounter something an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, having or showing a rational, modern, and well-informed outlook, to me, that seems like enlightened equates to actively seeking truth. And I think that's what we're doing as a collective now, is that we see all this stuff in the media. We have Republicans and Democrats, right, that can't hear each other. This is preschool stuff that we're seeing our nation's leaders do. He said this, she said this, me.
Right.
No working together, right? To where I know a lot of people and myself, I'm like, dude, fuck the media. Like I'm trying to look for truth in my community, talk to people, we're interviewing people,
Right.
to where we're seeking truth, we're listening, right? That's a huge part of how do you have or show a rational, modern, and well-informed outlook, where you're not well-informed if you're only listening to your party, if you're only red or you're only blue, and then you can't even hear. Well-informed outlook is people that are actively listening and empathizing and seeking truth. So for me, that's kind of what I think, at least the Google definition of enlightened says. But like I said before, when I think of enlightened, I think of really spiritual beings, like who are people that we think about in history that we may identify as enlightened beings. Right, in America, I would say probably the most popular person is Jesus Christ, right, that we think of as enlightened being. In the East, and even now Buddha, you think of the Buddha, his story is pretty awesome. And you have your more modern and or on the path to enlightenment, maybe people like your Mother Teresa's, your Gandhis, your Dr. Kings. These people, one thing that they all have in common is that they're not only always seeking truth, but they're always leading with love, right? Like Mother Teresa, I think in our last episode, we said one of her famous quotes is like, "I'll never be at an anti-war rally, but invite me to the pro-peace one."
Yeah.
And I think that we're doing a better job, but I think that's one of the biggest places where we can improve, is to be relentlessly aware of where we're putting our focus on.
Yeah, and I think it even starts prior to media consumption or wherever you spend your time. And it's just a shift in the mindset of going into conversations with the person you've been in a cubicle next to for 20 years, or the person you've seen every day for the last 4 years, however long your time is, to learn from them instead of to prove you're right.
Hmm.
And I think, to me, like listening to you talk and stuff, one of the notes I made is enlightenment is knowledge, not things. And I think maybe that's why we're at such a crossroads as a society, is for the last, World War II probably, we've been heavy consumers. We've been a consumer nation, and abundance of, bigger houses, more cars, fancier clothes. And now I think we're kind of at that tipping point where we have so much technology, we have so much things, but we're really realizing we're missing people.
Mm.
And we're missing genuine, legitimate interactions. And I think maybe that's why we're going through all this, to flip to that next stage where we all of a sudden appreciate we have some technology to make life easier, but then we also have times that are technology free where we're just engaging with one another to gather more information and gather more knowledge as people.
Yeah.
Think about, like, why do most wars start? Why do groups of people hate other groups of people? It's not usually an experience. It's just what they've been told.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told to go to war with this country, so we go to war with that country. But like on a human level, we're the same.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, that's a fantastic story. Like, the Afghanis literally risked their lives to hide him from the Taliban until the Americans could come get him. Right? So, like, even in war, you see these acts of humanity just at its core level, caring for one another. And I think I got to believe in my heart and in my spirit that that's where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
It is back to this enlightenment stage where we value learning from each other so that we can create a world that is better.
Yeah.
Instead of a world that's continually divided and redivided and divided again.
Yeah, I like that theory of we have way too much shit, and like, post-industrial revolution, now we're in the technological revolution, and maybe we kind of went a little past where we needed to in all of this mass production, and coming back a little bit. Like our boy Rustin Hughes, I just saw that he's made his entire garden more like permaculture and growing our own food and doing all these things, to where it's amazing how the saying less is more, when you really have that experience, how powerful that can be. And
this isn't a place where we place blame in our community or in this conversation, but think about it, right? Your grandparents' generation, the ones that really started leading consumerism, how did they get there? Well, they grew up during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
They were poor, so they had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as they could get stuff, they wanted it, right? Because they had to stockpile because they never knew when it was going to happen. Well, I think we've kind of kept that mentality, even though we've never had another Great Depression. We had the recession of 2008. But we've continued those patterns, and now, maybe we've just overwhelmed our world with so much stuff. And we realize that the vacuum in our lives can't be fixed by buying more things. It can only be fixed by getting to learn people and really respecting one another. And even like racism's still crazy to me. Like, we are literally more biracial mixed as a country now than we've ever been. Like, almost every family I know has at least a couple biracial families within it.
Yeah.
Yet people still walk around hating somebody based on color.
Yeah.
I think we're just to the point now where, like, wait, this doesn't make sense anymore. We've got to be able to fix this.
It doesn't, man. And I think that the reason there's all these nationwide protests and everything is because that's the super minority. I don't walk around seeing racist people. I refuse to believe that a lot of people are like that. We're not.
Only if what? We quit listening to all the stories people keep telling us, and we create our own stories. Mm-hmm. But I can only create my own story if I give you a chance to tell me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, if I live in the history books, yes, slavery, slave owners, civil wars, invasions of different countries. Oh, that's true. Like, I can't say it's not true, but it's not 2020.
Right.
But unless I sit down and talk with you, and we share, and we actually talk about, hey, why do you feel that way? Oh, that's interesting. Why do you feel this? Oh man, I've never thought of it. Unless we do that, why are we still living in the history books? Nothing is accurate anymore.
I love that. Here's an interesting point that I want to make, and this might be a future episode that we need to do. But why is it that we put so much attention? I mean, there's billions of pieces of information that we could study throughout history, American history, right? Why is it that we continue to focus on things like that we had slavery in our history? And like I remember looking at the black kids in the class when we would read like Huckleberry Finn or any of these books with slavery and kind of being like, well, that kind of sucks, like we're talking about slavery and you're the black kid in the class. And I didn't even learn how to do my fucking taxes in school, right? Like to where it's just interesting what we choose to focus on in history. And we say that history repeats itself. Well, why not? I'm not saying throw away history, but why not reframe how we teach it?
But I think that's what we're doing. I think, as we record this episode, they're tearing down statues of Jefferson Davis. They're demanding removal of the Confederate flag. Right? I think we are, like, part of getting past history is not having it in your face all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, think about if you're from a Jewish background and everywhere you went, there were still Nazi flags to commemorate that part of history. Well, how would you feel?
Right.
How would you go there? Would you be willing to move past that, or would you? Right. And I think about, like, I hadn't even thought of this, and it's probably, it's ignorant on my part, to be honest. As smart as I am, and as much as we've done in our world, we should have been aware of this. But if I'm an African American and I got to go to a courthouse and there's a Confederate flag hanging all the time, even if you tell me you're not racist,
yeah, fuck that.
why is that flag there? Like, what does that flag do? It's not our state flag.
Right.
It's not our country flag. It's not a county flag. It's literally the flag of the Confederate Army, which was defeated in the Civil War. They're the ones that represented slavery. They're the ones that fought to keep slavery.
Right. And why do we have to have a whole semester of that in 8th grade social studies or a freshman year? Like, why can't it just be like, hey guys, there was World War II, right? There was the Holocaust. There was an evil man named Hitler who did some fucked up shit. If you want to explore that, there's books in the library, right? Let's teach you how to do your taxes, or let's teach you how to do shit that you're actually going to use instead of have these evil stories that we have to study. There's trillions of stories and moments in history that we can study. But the only reason that things perpetuate themselves is because we continue. I mean, Holocaust, the Jews and the Palestinians, where Jesus was born, Bethlehem, Israel, are still for hundreds of years still arguing over this land. And like I was telling you, they look the same, right? Racism, dude. Like we're past this. Like it angers me that people are even putting this on the news. But I think this is great. I think, get the fucking Confederate flags out of here, these statues out of here. We can rewrite history. It doesn't need to be changed, right? But we can redirect our focus. And that's what I think is happening. So I want to talk a little bit
We
about...
got to empower people.
Yeah, and empowering them. And I think everyone has a responsibility to empower themselves. So I wanted to read this of what it is to be an enlightened being. From enlightenedbeings.com. It says, enlightenment is a state of pure awareness that is free from the chattering mind and constantly connecting with the infinite, all-loving, all-powerful light from the God source. So this is kind of cover-all language for whatever spiritual religion that you cover. But I think that we all know, like, all loving, all powerful light is what we strive for. And then even the Google definition, I mean, I would go as far to say that if you're listening to the On Purpose podcast, and most of humanity in general is going to want to be what Google says enlightened is, having or showing a rational, modern, and well-informed outlook, right? You go on Facebook and everyone wants to post and share what they think and share what they believe.
Right.
At the end of the day, everyone wants to have a rational, modern, informed outlook. So,
which is part of your argument, like, quit living in the past.
right.
Like, only doing things because history said you've done them or your grandparents did them, that's not modern.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to bring up old scars and old wounds because we never heal because we're constantly reminded of that.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think, do you believe that we should all strive to be enlightened, to reach enlightenment?
I don't see a downside to that.
Yeah.
Like if I'm always striving to learn and to grow as a person and to educate myself and to listen, like to me that seems to be the missing thing in our world today is nobody ever wants to listen to each other. They just want to be right.
Mm.
So yeah, I think we should definitely look to be enlightened. I think we should. I think that's where we're headed. Is you're seeing a big downsizing movement in people's houses. Minimalism's a big thing. I think what is that? It's a form of enlightenment, like realizing I don't need all these things to be happy. I just need this little stack, and if I have this little stack that makes me happy, now I have this much more time to go be happy. I think it's a movement that's already started. I think that's why meditation is on such a popular uptick right now. Is people are realizing like before I can be enlightened, before I can learn from you, I got to be in control of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's fantastic. And if you're listening to this podcast and in our community, I would argue that you're already on the path of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're showing up to learn and to feel better and to find yourself a little more. And I think when we do that, we're less judgy of each other. We're less cynical. We're less looking for differences and more open to, hey, what can I learn from this encounter?
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's so hard, Jared, to sometimes to not listen and just to react and to have your own opinion with blinders on?
Well, I think it's how we raise people. Think about when you go to school, from kindergarten to 12th grade, how many assignments did you do that were genuinely your opinions or thoughts on something versus how many were to document the facts as they were told to you?
Yeah, it's documenting facts.
Right. Very little is like, hey, what does this mean to you? Where it could be anything that's right if you do it right. I think we just right, like, and as everybody, let's talk about racism again real quick. People are always like, I see pictures of little white kids and little black kids playing together, and they're like, they don't know any race.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, they don't know race. Where do they learn it? It's part of our institutions. We go to school, we start talking about slavery, we start talking about this history. Why do little kids need to know that?
Right.
Like they're already generations past it. Why are we not teaching them about empowerment? Why are we not teaching them about, hey, here's all the positive African Americans you can look up to that have led the way? Why do we constantly go back to this baseline?
Right.
We condition that, right? And then as parents, right, it's a difficult balancing act, letting your kids have enough leeway to make their own decisions and formulate things versus structure and to keep them safe. But I think we can do better there. So I think why it's hard is because you got to trust in a process. And you can't standardize test it. Right? If I put you in a history class and I give you all these facts and you take a test with all these dates that all this stuff already happened, even though it has no impact on what's happening tomorrow, I can quantify if you learned or not. But if I ask your opinion on coronavirus and what was the impact of not going to school for the last quarter, and you lay it out, how do I quantify that? How do I show? And so then what does that go to? Money, right? Because we're funded based off of data. And I think that, to me, especially in police work, and I think in society as general, is we're so focused on being productive and grinding and efficient that we've lost the fact that in all the things we do, there's a person on the other end that's craving needs, right? To be heard, to have value, to have input. And I think that's ultimately, if I could envision where this enlightened world goes, that's where it goes, is we have technology to make us efficient so that we have more time to learn about each other.
Yeah.
And that's the merit, right? That's coming out of the technological revolution back to an enlightenment period where they kind of coexist. And you have technology to make your days easier, but not to replace each other.
Right. Because that's essentially what the whole work grind is for and to achieve, right? To have this wealth, financial abundance, to go spend time and do things with the people that you love, to travel, to meet new people, to interact and engage. That's what we work so hard for, but it ends up becoming all consuming and ever consuming.
It becomes a burden, right? Or think about it, you make more money, so what do? You buy more stuff. Well, now what do you need to do? You need to make more money to pay for more stuff. And how much of that stuff are you using? Not a ton of it, but you're in this cycle. Why does everybody like going on vacation? It's relaxing. I get to interact with strangers. We don't have to go on vacation and interact with strangers. They're around you all day long.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just on vacation you make the time to talk to somebody.
Mm.
Whereas when we're in our normal world, we're so busy to get to the next thing, we bypass person after person after person.
Right.
And that to me is what an enlightened person is going to do, is they're going to create that space where they're free to go learn from people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not chasing all these things. They realize that things do not fulfill them. And we've been tricked for years into consumerism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and honestly, you know, as much as we bash millennials, let's give them credit. And you might disagree, but I would say they've led us here. Right? The millennials didn't just jump out of college and go right to work. They went on gap years. They went backpacking. They took a job for 6 months and then quit because they had enough money to go on their next trip.
Mm-hmm.
And then dudes like me are like, what the fuck? Why aren't you? No, I hired you. You got to work 20 years. They're like, no. I don't
Fuck
think I want
that.
to work 20 years. I'm going to go. And now look at me. Like, I leave early, right? I'm like, hey, I want to work. You know, like, we've downsized houses. We're planning for new stuff. And it's the reality
Got
is
your Airstream
I
going.
got my Airstream. All those experiences are truly what life's about. At the end of the day, all the shit you have doesn't mean a thing.
Right.
And as much as we bash millennials, I thank them for kind of opening the eyes that, like, there's alternative ways. Like, it doesn't have to be high school, college, get a job, buy a house, pick a fence, 2.5 kids, work for 40 years, retire, and hope there's enough money left.
Right. There's no blueprint. There's no correct way to do life. Right. That's the beauty of it.
But we were conditioned to think there was.
Right. Yeah. And for
And where does
so
that
many
start?
people, parents, teachers,
School.
Yep.
Think about our school puts you into this pipeline. And I understand society needs workers to run, but man, happy workers are much more successful and enjoyable to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I truly believe when we talk about enlightenment, that's where we're going to head. And maybe this is all good. Maybe school districts facing a huge catastrophic shortfall because of coronavirus is actually really good.
Oh,
Because maybe they'll look at some stuff and go, hey, why waste all these monies on standardized tests that the kids stress over, they're anxious over, they don't truly measure knowledge, and let's just focus on more creative stuff. And you know what I mean? Or maybe we're going to teach them how to balance checkbooks or some of the life skill stuff. I don't know. I have to believe being enlightened and like kind of accepting like we're in this place to grow and become better on the back end, that all of this will teach us something valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think reframing our education system is going to be a huge part of this. Right?
Well, I would go to the universities.
Yeah.
You know, being in a university town, it breaks my heart when I see kids come here right out of high school with hopes and dreams of, oh, I'm going to be a CSU Ram, and this is so awesome. And at the end of 4 years, they have a massive student loan debt. The jobs they're qualifying for are at a fraction of the money they need to make to pay that back. And then they literally have student loans for 30 years.
Big institutions, man.
But again, I hope, like, if all this is going to crash, let's crash it all, and let's rebuild something smarter.
Yeah. So with Reaching Enlightenment, Jared, we talked a little bit about people in history. That it would have been amazing to be around to witness leaders like that, like anyone from Jesus Christ all the way to Dr. King. Who do you think today are people that are on that path of enlightenment that we can look to for some guidance, some good role models?
Man, in today's world, man, I don't know, like, off the top of my head, who I follow and who I look to lead. Now that's a good question. I would, going back a little bit in history, I would ask if Harriet Tubman wasn't enlightened.
I don't know too much about Tubman.
Simply for the fact she ran the Underground Railroad.
Right.
Right, and she risked herself to free slaves and run them to the north. And we could Google, I forget how many she actually rescued and got to the north, but she has a quote saying like she could have done like 10 times more if only they would have risked wanting to be free.
Yeah. I saw another one. I think she's like, I could have saved this much more if only they knew they were slaves.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them were like, oh, I'm not a slave. I get paid well. And I get.
Right. They had no idea.
Yeah, I heard that on E.T., the hip
Yeah,
hop
yeah. Okay,
preacher.
so we heard the same thing. Yeah, so like
Yeah.
to me, is that enlightened?
Mm-hmm.
Like she's risking herself to bring people to freedom that they don't even know they're missing because they've been brought up in this whole world.
Mm-hmm.
What about Abraham Lincoln? I mean, he risked everything to argue to free slaves
Yeah.
and to actually go to war with his own country, the worst war we've ever had when literally Americans were killing Americans. And slavery wasn't the main thing, but it was part of the package of why we went to war.
Mm-hmm.
That's enlightenment to me to see what we could become versus what we are.
Yeah.
What about you? Would you have anybody like current day?
That's tough, man. For me, I think there's a lot of amazing people in our world that are on the path to enlightenment in certain ways. And I read this really cool book called Be Love Now by Ram Dass. So Ram Dass is a very famous Harvard professor. He recently died, actually. It was just a couple years ago. He has a Netflix movie, too. It just came out 2020, I believe. I forget what it's called. But, yeah, check it out. It's a cool one. Anyways, the dude was very educated. Obviously, he was a Harvard professor, very into the LSD and psychedelics, and then he went to India and he met this guru there. So I read the book and read a lot about that guru and these other quote unquote enlightened beings out of India, and a lot of them are truly lead with love. It's very like I see a lot of this, police this and the rioters that. And so what I would envision like an enlightened being, like a Jesus Christ type of person doing is finding out how to love the people that hate you or the people that you're supposed to hate. And I think that's a quote in the Bible as well of like,
Interesting.
it's easy to love those who love you. That's easy.
Yeah, we can all do that.
But how do you love those who hate you or those that you were
taught to hate?
Taught to hate, exactly. How can you love them? And if we can do that, it's so hard, but if we can swallow our pride, take a deep breath, and try to find things that we love about that other side, whoever the opposing side is, right? Love comes back. There's this awesome quote. I forget who it's from. I think it's OG Mandino. It says, love is never lost. If not immediately reciprocated, it will flow back and soften the heart.
Yeah.
So like Mr. Grinch or Mr. Scrooge or whatever, you can give that guy love and he may be like, bah humbug, fuck you, like fuck off or whatever. But eventually that love will soften his heart. And if we can continue to love, again, it's hard because there's some inflammatory shit and sometimes you just want to be like, hey, fuck you, and yell and scream. But if we're on the path to enlightenment, when we feel that anger and that frustration come up, that's an opportunity right there to practice, to get further on the path of that enlightenment, of feeling that anger and stuff coming up and being like, let it release, take a deep breath, go do whatever you got to do and find a way that you can replace it with love. And if you can do that, you're going to start seeing just a more loving world. And it's going to start with your experience.
And I think that's where we need to look. Going back to your question, like, why is it hard for me to think of people that I think are truly enlightened now? It's because I don't know who to trust, to be honest. Like, everybody's so gimmicky right now. And, like you mentioned Tony Robbins. Well, like, he sells stuff too.
Right.
When I think of the truly enlightened people, they weren't selling anything but truth and just their opinions, and they were good listeners. And I'll be honest, like, you're probably the most enlightened person I'm around every day.
My man, I appreciate
You know what I mean?
that.
You read, you study, you ask me tough questions, you challenge yourself. Like what's the best act of enlightenment is having a position, learning about it, and then going, no, I was wrong. I got a new position. Like you did that with Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like when this whole first thing came out, you're like, I can't support them. Like I just don't agree with this. And then you had a conversation with somebody that reached out to you. You were enlightened enough to be open, to listen, not to try to prove him wrong. Be like, okay, let me hear your story. Okay. Yep, I'm going to help you out. You know what I mean? And I think, so I guess that's where I would even spin that question back is, the most enlightened people in our world today are probably near us already
Yeah.
if we're paying attention to them. Like, I don't need to look to Tony Robbins or Gary Vee or Eric Thomas, even though I love ETA. But he has his own biases. He has his own perceptions,
Right.
and I don't get to know the whole story. I only see the public stuff. But like with you, I see like, hey, here's your faults, here's your strengths. Hey, you felt this way, but then you went and got more information and found out like, fuck, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm not wrong, but I wasn't as right as I thought it was, so I need to move a little bit. And I applaud you for that, and I love having it rub off on me. And I'll tell you, like, this whole deal, my oldest daughter's biracial, and she's as liberal as they get right now, which she should be. She's a college kid, you know what I mean? Like, you should be liberal in college.
Right.
And we've had more, like, genuine, open, and honest conversations about police and brutality and race and all this stuff now than we've ever had before. And I think, quite honestly, for me, a lot of it's just being around you and being like, okay, I don't want to talk. I just want to hear all of her stories as to why she feels that way so that I can appreciate it. Because why wouldn't I want to know how she feels? Why would I want to immediately try to invalidate how she feels because I feel a different way and my way has to be right?
Mm-hmm.
And I applaud you for that, and I thank you for being in my life in that role and that facet because it's helped me a great deal.
Thanks, man. Yeah, like I've said before, this is always very therapeutic for me, and likewise, I feel the same. A lot of what you bring rubs off on me, and I think too is back to Zach Mercurio, one of our
I'm
previous
reading his
guests.
book right now.
Great, yeah, and how I love how he says that. How could you not matter? How could everyone not matter to where your opinion does matter? And I think one thing that I see, and it's unfortunate because we're being led this way, right? Like Trump and Biden. I see this thing on Facebook, like condemn Trump that Biden's running. And it's just so bad to where, we follow suit to where we completely tarnish our perspective of somebody if they have one smidge on their entire track record. Like Tony Robbins, I see some people, oh, well, he cheated on his wife, so therefore anything that he ever says, like he's a piece of shit, right? Or, Trump said grab her by the pussy, right? So, or one thing that we said that a person says, and now everything that they've ever said or that they speak is invalidated, right? To where if we can really lead with love and be enlightened, right? That previous definition, all forgiving, right? And try to be godly, right? Of like, hey, I forgive them. Okay, Trump, you said some bad shit in the past, or Biden said some stupid shit, or whatever it is. This person said a racist comment. Instead of hating and be like, oh, no, they're a fucking racist, blah, blah, be like, you know what? I want to try and forgive and love them. Imagine what kind of world that would be if the majority of our people tried to do that. Again, it's hard. But living on purpose ain't easy.
But I think that goes back to your point earlier. Why do we spend so much time teaching negative history?
Mm-hmm.
It's
right.
It's the opposite of forgiving. Right? If I'm constantly taught about how I've been wronged or how I've been oppressed or how this is that, I don't ever move to forgiveness. What if all of us right now are like, hey, right? What if we went to the Native Americans and sought forgiveness for how they were treated, how their lands were taken, and we brought them back into the mainstream America? What if African Americans, we went to them and we asked forgiveness for the slavery and stuff? What if all people of color went to white people and were like, hey, we forgive you for judging that you've had an easy life and everything's so much different? What if we just got rid of that? It goes back to your whole point. Like, enlightenment is being able to learn and to forgive because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
But what we're told constantly is about all of our imperfections.
Right. None of us are perfect, yet we will judge as soon as there's an imperfection in
somebody else, for sure.
Right? I'm like, nah, he's a piece of shit, bro. You didn't hear what he said, or
well, think about when somebody runs for president. The highest office we have, the most powerful person in the world. Very little of our time is spent learning about what great things they've done. It's literally about digging up all the dirt you can find on them.
Yeah, what a joke.
So I think that's why what we're going through right now is people challenging the status quo, using your social media to be a media source, challenging all the things we've been told so that we can choose to go differently in the future. Mm-hmm. And instead of just being force-fed differences and negativity and mistakes, like you said, let's forgive. And nobody's perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. The next president won't be perfect. So instead of having these fake lives where everybody pretends to be perfect, we actually admit we're not perfect. And we
Yeah.
relieve that pressure of trying to live up to that,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great idea to try and get on the path of enlightenment, right? Knowing that, hey, we're not perfect. We've made mistakes before and we're going to make mistakes again. We're going to say stupid things every now and then, things that we regret. We're going to be wrong.
Right.
And
But we're going to get information. We're going to read. If we watch, even you brought up a Netflix, if we watch a Netflix movie, we're going to go afterwards and Google and fact check because we understand Netflix has an agenda as well, right? Which isn't wrong. Like they're trying to make money. So they spin things to make it the best, right? And I think that's what enlightened people do. We don't take anything just at face value,
right.
especially information. Like your conversations, like I want to learn and like what you tell me, your experience, like I might do some research to see if it applies. But I think that's where we are truly waking up as a society is questioning all the stuff we keep being told.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, then we can start making our own truths instead of just believing what somebody told us.
Yeah. No, I like that. And there's a reason why we have 2 ears and one mouth. We should listen more.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just got to be cognizant of what we listen to.
Mm-hmm.
We could go into other things, but just today I watched an independent news story. It was all about how the major networks take the same story and reframe it differently to fit their own agenda. And it was even to the point of photoshopping things into pictures to make it fit their narrative. And I'm just like, at least now we're exposing this.
Yeah.
At least now we have the technology to go, hey, that's crazy. I saw the same guy in 6 different photos from 8 different cities, and he's dressed like, okay, so he wasn't really at any of these.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I like that our kids question why. I like that millennials have really, to me, set the path to question things, want different stuff in life. And now it's an opportunity for us to rewrite our history instead of continue to relive it.
Yeah. Amen. Amen to that.
Yeah, I think it's good. What do you think? You got some practice for them?
Yeah, I got a little purposeful practice for reaching enlightenment. And first part is to define what reaching enlightenment means and looks like to you.
Good question.
There's a lot of different definitions out there, so identifying that for you is important. And then also identifying what are you doing to try and become a more enlightened being. There's lots of different ways and actions and tasks that you can do to try and become more enlightened. And then, of course, the third piece is email your practice to us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com. We always love to read those,
Yeah.
give some feedback. And again, that's part of reaching enlightenment is communicating, listening.
Well, and I was
sharing.
literally just going to say that. Like, if I could, like you definitely live that to me. And for our listeners, if you're like, I don't even know how to start to be enlightened. When I look at Ali and I think like he's knowledgeable in so many areas, I can learn from him. Here's why. He constantly seeks information from a variety of sources. Like you've never once told me about one book you read in that form. You're like you read a book and then you read another book about that book, or you know what I mean? Like you're multiple sources. 2, he shares it. So now other people can learn from his enlightenment or challenge it. Maybe he has an opinion because he read a certain book, but I read a book that was on the opposite. So now we can come together. And 3, you're open to learning it, right? So you're seeking information, you're open to accepting it. And then 3, we share it. And I think if you're not sure how to become enlightened, just try with that. Gather information, learn, be open to adjusting your opinions, and then share it with somebody and see if, in fact, you're actually maybe on the right path, see what they have to offer.
Yeah, love that.
I mean, how many conversations we have to start with? And it always starts from you because I'm not nearly the reader you are. And you're always like, dude, I was reading a book and so-and-so said this. And I'm like, I don't know. Well, like today, you told me about Rashidon.
Yeah, Sadhguru.
Yeah, well, no, you mentioned the other guy, the one you said, the Harvard professor.
Ram Dass.
And then we ended up in a video with
Sadhguru.
Sadhguru. You know, I'd be like, so all that I learned today simply by your enlightenment. And I think that's what true enlightenment is. It's this sharing of knowledge. It's not one person having it all and I have to be right and all of you bow to me. It's like, hey, I learned this. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
So start there, community.
Yeah.
Let's go. I truly, truly believe that on the backside of chaos and the backside of all this adversity, we literally have the opportunity to emerge as like a super, not a superpower, because that means like we're higher than other people, but like a super
Utopia.
yeah, like a place where like people matter again, and technology is good, but it's not the end all be all, and we can literally get back to experiencing all the joys of the world.
Yeah, super happy world.
Why not?
It's time.
We've
It's
tried
time.
all the other stuff.
Yeah.
We've been killing each other for years.
Yeah, killing each other, killing ourselves, mental health, depression, war. Like, let's try just being super happy.
Let's try it. Let's try gathering information, sharing it with a friend, and buy less shit.
Let's do it.
All right, team, as we wrap up another episode of the On Purpose podcast, we are thankful for having you all on our journey. We want to announce new ways to include you and let you go deeper into our community. First off, we got the onpurposepodcast.com website where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, get inside tips, and see what's coming up in the upcoming months. As well as our new launch is our Patreon account. We have 5 tiers where you can decide at what level you want to contribute to the podcast and the community, help support us, continue to push us forward and grow. And it's as little as 50 cents an episode or $2 a month, all the way up to $50 a month, depending on where you want to be. Perks of this are sneak peek episodes. You get the episodes quicker. You get to contribute on episodes. You get monthly Q&As with Ali and I and special guests. And you get to be a building block for our community as we continue to grow worldwide. With the release of Shelly Davies' episode, we are now international. And we're excited for the future leads us. So please fit in with us wherever you are comfortable. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We'll see you next week.